years ahead, he was able to predict to the minute solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, 10 years before they happened. I mean, by watching the motion through a telescope, unbelievable what the guy did. He once took the back off a pocket watch, saw how it worked, went home and carved a wooden clock with all the gears, mainspring, and it was accurate to within 1 minute a year. A wooden clock the guy did.
Wow.
He's the guy who laid out Washington, D.C. He's the surveyor who did all that. He's a brilliant mathematician. Jefferson gave him...
Never knew this.
No. Jefferson gave him an example to France, said, hey, you guys in France think that blacks are inferior? Here's Benjamin Banneker.
Okay, first, representatives, I asked, when did we have our first black Speaker of the House? When did we have the first Speaker of the House? 1789. When did we have our first black Speaker of the House? I bet most people would say never.
Never, except it was right here. Joseph Hayne Rainey. Joseph Hayne Rainey of South Carolina is the first black to preside over the House of Representatives. These are the first 7 blacks elected to Congress. You have here Senator Hiram Rhodes Revels, the first black U.S. Senator elected. He was a minister of the gospel. He was a missionary. He worked with Frederick Douglass. He recruited 3 regiments of black soldiers in the Civil War, and he was a missionary to slaves in the South. You have here Benjamin Turner, Josiah Wall, the largest. This guy right here is really cool. Robert Brown Elliott is probably the most brilliant guy of that era. He actually took on the vice president of the Confederacy in a debate on the floor and just tore his head off. The racist Alexander Stephens. It was a great debate.
When did we turn? Were these guys proud Americans, or did they say
this is the epitome of what we were just talking about. These were individual guys. Half of these guys taught themselves to read. Half of these guys were slaves, and 5 years later, they're sitting in Congress. And as slaves, it was a capital offense to learn to read. So these guys in 5 years, and I'll guarantee you read their speeches and records of Congress, you better have a dictionary and thesaurus in both hands because you want to understand the language they use. It is so brilliant what these guys did.
But were they there to say the white man is bad and the America is bad?
No. And these guys were Richard Allen. Let me go back here. Richard Allen had been in slavery. Richard Allen was in slavery, and he held no bitterness at all. He says God would not allow bitterness even in Joseph when he was in prison. Do you think God will allow it in us? He said we can't have bitterness. He said, by the way, there were some whites who held us in slavery, but it's whites who are working for our freedom. I mean, these guys had no bitterness. They wouldn't allow it.
As we close in on the third hour of your mindset about black folks in America, we hope that you enjoyed our conversation with Mr. Willie West and some of the most important issues in regards to black folks in this country we call America. Your mindset. And you preach a certified profound difference between blacks and whites in America and how they view the current state of relationship and racial equality in the ways they experience day-to-day life. Profound. What is your elements of their thinking on what is taking place in America today? Continues. The mix of life continues. We hope that you have enjoyed today's program, and we're going to close it out. We're going to go to that about God, who God is, and who we are as a person, and the power of God. God is present. He's in the affairs of men. He's in all that takes place in this place we call America. God is ever present. He is not asleep. He's not mocked. He knows. And we hope that you will assess accordingly and understand who God is and that God is in the affairs of men. There's nothing that he do not know. There's nothing that he do not see. Because God is ever present with us. We're going to close this out with some old-time gospel, old-time gospel greats.
He's an old-time God. Wade in the water.